Hello everyone. My name is Surya Vednathan and I'm a product manager at Microsoft. In today's session, I will walk you through the expense management capabilities of D365. Let's now look at some of the key benefits of using D365 as an expense management solution. D365 helps you reduce organizational expenditure by automating the end-to-end expense management processes and increasing compliance. You can also gain visibility into costs and plan for employee spending using policies, travel requisition, and analytics. Connect your project costing and accounting data using D365's accounting module or integrate it with your own ERP to meet your needs. You can also easily extend your product functionality to suit your business needs. With all these capabilities, D365 Expense makes expense management a breeze. The expense management process usually involves a user who files their expenses, a manager or approver who approves these expenses, and a finance member who reviews these before payment to the employee or the credit card vendor. D365 Expense provides capabilities at each step of the user journey to make their work easier, faster, and accurate. The insights generated from your company's expense transactions are useful to cut costs. For example, knowing the expense areas that contribute the most to your company's travel expenses might require you considering spending limits for that expense type by location, or knowing which hotel vendors employees mostly use can help strike preferred vendor partnerships and trim down travel and expense costs. You might also want to understand how your expenses stack up against your planned yearly budget and make any mid-year alterations to your policies if needed. Let's take a look at some of the capabilities that make entering expenses easy and quick. Let's talk about the receipt capture or OCR feature that enables users to auto-create expense transactions from receipts on their desktop. Once a user uploads a receipt, Microsoft's own AI service extracts the merchant's name, date, and total amount from the receipts. The user can match unattached transactions to unattached receipts. The user can also create manually entered expense transactions from receipts. Alternatively, the user can simply attach the receipt to an existing expense. This feature helps reduce the time it takes to create expenses and makes expense reporting fairly easy. Let's talk about the next feature, expense itemization. You can easily itemize hotel and other expenses into individual line items such as daily room rate, restaurant, and taxes. For certain expense categories, your company can require that employees list individual charges that produce the total amount. For example, you can divide a hotel charge into daily room rate, restaurant, and taxes. Let's talk a little bit about policies now. An effective, transparent, accessible expense policy is crucial for managing expenditure at any organization. Policies help guarantee that employees stay within budget, provide all required information, and spend money only as they need to. Icons are used to determine which expenses require an action. If a line has a green icon, no action is required. If it has a red check mark, it implies a policy error and needs to be fixed. Once fixed, the error disappears and the employee can submit the expense. For example, you can set a policy for hotel expenses in Dallas, which states that the per night expense cannot exceed $200 USD. If a worker submits an expense report or a travel requisition in which the room rate exceeds this amount, the system will notify the worker that the policy amount for the expense has been exceeded. You can configure the message that the worker will receive when you define the policy. You can also create and manage expense reports on behalf of another person. You can delegate to a user for a specific expense report, or you can delegate to the user for a specific amount of time. For example, let's say the approver goes on leave. They will delegate their approval authority to the team supervisor who has the same security access. Or an admin might be delegated to manage all the expenses for the company leadership. Let's get into the demo where we demonstrate key capabilities that we just talked about. Alicia Smith is a project manager working for Contoso Consulting. She was recently assigned to a process optimization project for a client located in California. To better understand the client's requirements, she has been asked by her account manager to visit them in person. She will be there for a day and has been told to expense the charges incurred as part of this trip to the project. During the trip, she incurred a few expenses like hotel, meals, and taxi, which she charged to her company credit card. Now that she is back, she needs to submit her expense report to avoid any late fees on her credit card. She would like to spend as less time on this as possible, so she decides to use the OCR feature to upload all her receipts. In the meantime, her credit card transactions have been automatically imported for her and are available under unattached expenses. She creates a new expense report and adds these transactions to her report. Alicia starts by creating a new expense report. She finds that there are 4 expenses she can add from her credit card transactions, but she wants to make sure that those are the transactions she would like to add to her report, so she selects none. She selects San Francisco as the location and the project as city manufacturing. She starts by adding her unattached expenses, which are her credit card transactions that have been imported for her. She selects taxi, hotel, and meal. Now that her expenses are available, she wants to upload her receipts. She goes to Receipts and selects Add Receipt. She browses for the receipt and picks the hotel receipt from her desktop. The OCR feature, as you will notice, has extracted the transaction date, the amount, and the merchant from the receipt. She attaches this to her existing unattached expense. Next, she adds another receipt for meal. She attaches this to her meal expense line. And finally, she adds a receipt for her taxi receipt. And attaches this to the taxi expense line. Next, she would like to add a cash transaction that she made at the corner store. She did not make this charge on her credit card, so she needs to create an expense line for this item. She hits Create, selects the category as Meal, and says Save. Now let's go back and look at the expenses in her report. You can see that the expense was automatically created for her using the OCR feature. If you will notice, the hotel line item has a red policy icon on it saying there is a policy error. The expense is not completely itemized. So let's itemize this receipt. As you can see, she has parking, room accommodations, sales tax, and occupancy tax on her receipt. Let's break these down. Daily room rate is entered as 104. Parking is $18. And then she has room tax for 8.32. If you will notice, the remaining balance is shown clearly on the itemization as well. Now that the receipt is completely itemized and the remaining balance is 0, we can close this entry. You will notice that the policy error has gone and now it's replaced by a green check mark, which means that the expense report is now ready to be submitted. Achieve policy compliance and control costs at your organization using easy-to-use tools, automated workflows, and real-time policy alerts. Let's now look under the hood at some of the key configurations that were required to enable this experience for Alicia. This is the Reimagined Expense UI. The Reimagined Expense UI simplifies the experience and reduces the time needed to complete expense reports. The expense management workspace is the landing page for creating and submitting expense reports. The expense form is highly customizable and enables organizations to decide and configure based on whether specific data is required, optional, or unnecessary when expense reports are entered. For example, required data is amount, payment method, and location. Optional might be project ID, and unnecessary data might be the sales tax group. Let's now look at some of the workflow capabilities in D365 Expense. Automated workflows reduce the time that it takes from the submission of an expense to when it is approved. Simple workflows could include a hierarchy-based workflow that requires all expense reports to go to the user's manager for approval. A more complicated workflow could be a multi-level approval workflow that is required when the total value of the expense report exceeds a specific amount and the limits vary depending upon the user's or submitter's role in the organization. Workflows can be created for expense reports, travel requisitions, cash advances, and VAT recovery. The components of the workflow editor include an action pane that runs along the top of the workflow editor, contains buttons you can use to navigate in the workflow, and you can copy and paste the workflow elements and configure properties. The workflow elements consist of various elements like tasks, approval processes, or flow control elements. Workflow elements can be added to the workflow that you are creating, and in order to use these elements, just drag them from the workflow elements onto the canvas. The canvas is the main area where the workflow elements can be arranged. The flow of the business process you're modeling is indicated by the connectors that join the elements. Policies are very critical to any expense management application. They help guarantee that employees stay within budget, provide all required information, and spend money only as they need to. There are 3 different policies you can create. You can create a warning policy that allows the employee to submit an expense report or a travel requisition. The expense will be marked for all approvers and for later reporting, but they'll still be allowed to submit it. An error policy requires the employee to address the error. They have to comply with the policy before submitting the expense report. A justification requires the employee or manager to enter a justification for exceeding the policy amount or for taking a business class instead of an economy class, and they can still submit the expense report after they have provided a justification. Policies are created against expense categories and expense types. They are valid for specific time periods or set to never expire. Out-of-box policy actions are configurable by each expense line field, and they allow for great flexibility in catering to every organization's need. A travel requisition ensures that travel expenses that are incurred for the business are authorized and follow organization policies, while also ensuring that budgets are maintained. A travel requisition is a source document that lists the expenses that will be incurred for the purpose of travel. For example, let's say your organization is working on a fixed price project that requires travel. The travel expenses of the project team members must fit within the budget of the project. Requiring that the travel expenses be approved before they are incurred ensures that the project stays within budget. Finally, credit card integration for D365 Expense ensures that you get better and more accurate expense tracking. By integrating a corporate credit card into D365 Expense, a company can see the exact purchases and charges on the report from the credit card statement directly, proving that the expenses being listed are, in fact, genuine and business related. This helps companies and businesses to avoid paying for non-business related or agreed upon expenses and saves the company money from otherwise fraudulent charges. With D365 Expense, you can set up credit card transactions to be imported either on a recurring schedule or you can manually import them as required. Let's now get into a demo of what these capabilities look like. Let's now look at the field visibility form that allows you to configure which fields should show up on your expense report. The expense report tab allows you to look at all the fields that are available as part of your expense report header. You can set these to recommended or do not display depending upon your organization's need for capturing data. Let's move on to the Expense tab. This is where you see the fields for your expense report. Everything under this has fields that will appear on each expense line of your expense report. If tax is set to do not display, it will not show up on your expense report. Okay, let's get into the workflows demo now. We have configured a condition that if the expense report amount is greater than $1,000 and project ID is 92 as is true, then the expense report should be rejected. Else, the expense report should be approved. Let's look at the workflow history for this expense report that was rejected. This expense report for Alicia was evaluated against that condition. Since the amount was more than $1,000, the condition evaluated to true, and as such, the expense report was rejected. As you can see, this is an example of a conditional workflow. Let's start with setting up policies for this expense report. Let's go to Expense Report Policies. Expense policy for USSI, which is the legal entity we are logged in. If you will notice, you can provide a name for your expense policy and a description. You can select the organizations or the legal entities to which this policy would apply. And on top of that, you can set up policy rules for each of the expense categories that are configured for that legal entity. Let's review the policy for hotel that is currently active. There is always an effective date and an expiration date. For this policy, there is no expiration date. And provide the legal entity for which the policy is active, and then provide the conditions as to when the policy should get triggered. Where expense subcategory equals value hotel daily room rate and transaction amount is greater than 200 USD, allow users to submit and approve but display a warning message. The warning message can be configured under the text box that's provided here. In this case, it says the policy amount for the expense has been exceeded. And then hit Save. Let's create now a policy for making receipts attachment a mandatory requirement at your organization. Create a policy rule. Select the condition. Do not allow users to submit until they enter a justification. And hit OK. You can save this policy and you're good to go. Let me now walk you through how you can import credit card transactions. Let's do a manual import of credit card transactions. Click on Import Transactions, provide the job name, provide the file format, and hit Upload. Once uploaded, click Import. As you can see, the import has succeeded and your credit card transactions are populated. Now let's see if the credit card transactions are available under unattached expenses for Alicia. As you can see, the credit card transactions that were imported are now available under unattached expenses. Setting up delegates is very easy. Just go to the delegate setup form and select the user for whom you would set up a delegate. Here I am selecting Alicia Smith as the employee for whom the delegate will be April. We can also provide start and end dates to define the validity of the delegate relationship. D365 Expense has a lot of reporting options and interesting analytics that managers and organization leadership can use to determine in order to modify policies and manage spend. The reporting options available out of the box include posted transactions, expenses with tax recovery, expenses by cost groups, personal expenses per employee, mileage per employee, per diem per employee, vendor balances, and travel requisitions. All these reports are available with the click of a button and fairly easy to generate. There are some interesting dashboards called Admin Analytics under the Expense Management workspace. Admin Analytics allows organizations a preview into their employee spending patterns by quarter or by year. They can forecast expenditures and plan accordingly. They can also get insights into employee preferred vendor choices. They can understand about fraudulent claims and understand where spending needs to be curbed. Personal analytics gives the employees a bird's view into their spending patterns and the status of their expense reports in different stages of processing. Let's take a look at the Admin Analytics dashboard here. The first tab, which is the Expense Overview tab, gives you an insight into the outstanding amount, the submitted and unapproved expenses, the approved expenses, as well as the total expense amount. Admins can also get a view of who are the top 5 merchants, and they can also look at the expense report policy violations per employee. There is also an expense report summary pane that allows them to drill down into each of the users and their expense transactions that were submitted. As you can see, some of the transactions that we just submitted appear here for Alicia Smith. The Employee Statistics pane allows a deep insight into the expense report submitted per employee. And here you can see the average expense amount is 189.49, and then there is a list of all the expense reports that she has filed over the last few years. The slider on the top of this pane allows you to drill down by date and not have to focus on all the expense reports as needed. The Personal Expenses tab provides a view of the personal expenses submitted by the employee and helps you understand how many employees are using the company credit card for personal expenses. The Employee Comparison tab allows the organization to view at the expenses spent per employee. They can also click on each of these cost types configured for their organization and see where these expenses come from, which employee is spending the most on these. Or alternatively, you can also select employees on the left-hand side pane and see how much they have spent over a specific period of time. Here is the Personal Analytics dashboard for Alicia Smith. She can go inside this dashboard and look at her expenses by cost type like conference, parking, hotel, flight, etc. Or she could go into this dashboard and review the amount of money spent at each vendor, and she can look at her process transactions or the project-based transactions. This is a very interesting dashboard as it provides a good glimpse into the expense spent by the employee on different areas while also providing them a bird's eye view of different expenses in different states. Here are some key benefits of using D365 expense management. It leads to improved employee productivity, improved compliance with regional and global tax regulations, has inbuilt integration with D365 accounting module, provides faster expense processing using automated workflows. It reduces the reimbursement cycle and costs and provides insights into organization spending. Thank you for joining us on this presentation. If you would love to learn more about expense management or project operations, please feel free to use the resources available on this slide.